The following programming is sponsored by Mark J. Bernstein. The views expressed do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, its management, or Beasley Media Group. Entrepreneur, founder, author, and financial advisor Mark Bernstein helps high-performing business owners turn their visions into reality. Through his innovative work and the Forward Focus Forums, Mark connects entrepreneurs to resources that fuel their success. Founders Forum is a radio show and podcast where entrepreneurs share their journeys, revealing the lessons they've learned and the stories behind their success. Join Mark and his guests for a mix of inspiration, valuable insights, and a little fun. Now, let's dive in.
Good morning, America. How are you? This is Mark Bernstein. This is Founders Forum, and we're here again for the third show in a row with our guests, Jason Sfire and Sari Green. And it's really like I want to take you guys on the road with me. This would be great.
This would be fun.
That would be great. I'd love to.
So this is a good combination of people. I like it. So today is part 2 with Jason Sfire. You've heard his story. I'm going to give you a real quick reintroduction without going through the whole thing. Jason is president and owner of multiple family-owned businesses under the name Fidelity Group Limited. They're in the real estate development and management and construction business. And I'm presuming that if you're listening to this show, you've listened to part 1, because you won't appreciate part 2 unless you listen to part 1.
So go back and listen to part 1 first.
So go back first. Exactly right.
Yeah.
And I won't do the whole thing again. But Jason is very active today after having, if you heard part 1, he's had 2 major falls in his life. 2 falls, let's just call it. He's had over 54 surgeries, and he's gone through a lot, and you haven't heard it all. You're going to hear the rest of it today. But as I said before, it's a story of courage, resilience, love, and humanity at its best. And I think that's a great place to pick it up. Just really quick, our topic on the last show was about this issue of this documentary that's coming out called Can't Look Away, the case against social media. And I've just asked our 2 guests to think about it again and just have a real quick comment on it, because we want to save the rest of the time for this story. So go ahead, start with Sari.
Yeah, the last show really made me kind of pause and reflect. And I guess all I have to say about social media right now is that I really want to kind of look more about self-directed of how I'm using social media. Make sure that I'm really using it in the right way for the right reasons, and that I'm not responsibly and not harmful to others or to myself. And so I think that's really what I've taken away from our last conversation.
That one. I never use it to harm other people, but I have harmed myself in using it at times.
I think we could harm other people potentially if we're telling a false story. Right? We're giving a false impression. Right. And so, there's unintentional harm that sometimes we cause. And I really want to reflect on that.
I like that. And by the way, I wish they hadn't called it the case against social media, because it's here to stay. I don't think it's
right.
And it has a lot of good things you can do with it. It should be the case to improve social
better,
media,
encourage better use,
exactly.
And I think real quick for me, this is something, and Mark, actually we just talked about this recently, the 2 of us. For me, I have opportunities to do things in advocacy and sports that I'm now in through social media, but I really have struggled with finding a good balance of how to use social media well. So this has challenged me a little bit too, Sari, to kind of say, okay, if there are things I can do to advocate for people with disability, which is my passion and kind of my heart now, and social media is a really strong vehicle for that, then maybe this is an opportunity for me to go ahead and educate myself. Or if I can't do it myself, maybe hire somebody who is educated to understand how to use the tool well, because it is just another medium or tool that we can use to go ahead and advocate for business, advocate for, mission and things that we're doing.
Yeah, see, that's what I like about this group I have here today, thoughtful people thinking about it, because there are people that just say, well, I'm not going anywhere near social media. I hate that stuff.
Yeah.
And then there's the other extreme of people that are on all the time posting all kinds of things that are annoying at minimum and pretty harmful at their most. So
it's kind of a both and conversation, I think. Yeah.
So, but look, it's here. It's a reality. So it's what do you do with it? I think is what we're all talking about. So where we left off was you had your second fall. You were going along in life. You're your body was deteriorating while this was going on.
Right.
And then what?
Yeah, so I think I kind of took us through, and we didn't talk much about timelines, but as I was describing the story, I feel like I got to around the 2008, 2009 kind of time period. And that would have been kind of when JJ, my son that you've met, Mark, who's your neighbor down here in Florida, he's 15. Yeah. And it's important that I add in here because I would really be remiss to tell my family story and our family history if I didn't mention that, through our older daughter, Abby, who was, she's now 24. Then she was born right after the second accident, excuse me. So, back in, if she's 24, she was kind of, it was back in 2001 area. And then we had 4 miscarriages. So I'm dealing with, and my wife's dealing with, me having all of these surgeries, all of this recovery, all the things we talked about in part 1. And now we have on top of that 4 miscarriages.
And that's something we talked about because we have that in common.
We do. Yeah, you're right. You did share that with me.
So I know how traumatic that is without all the other
stuff going on. Yeah, and we never really spent a ton of time trying to figure out what caused all of it because there was too many other things. Like if you ask Nettie, my wife, she'd be like, "Listen, I didn't have time to worry about going to the doctor to figure out what was going on because you were at the doctor enough for everybody we knew." So we were just trying to survive at that point.
You were taking up all the space.
I was taking up the space. I'm I'm a doctor hog. That's it. But anyways, so we get to this kind of 2008, 2009 period, and all of a sudden, Nettie comes home and she's like, "Hey, guess what? I'm pregnant." And I'm like, "What?" Like, when and I guess I shouldn't say what. I think she didn't tell me. This is the part that I say what about now that I reflect back on it. Was that she didn't tell me until she was like 3 months at this point. Because there had been so many times that we would just get our hopes up as a family. And then, so anyways.
I understand that one completely.
Yeah. So then anyways, 2009, the summer of 2008 comes and she almost loses JJ again. And I tell this part because this is a miracle story. So we're about ready to have our 5th miscarriage, and we got on the phone with, I had said in part 1, we had some great friends for 20 years from church and everything. Dave and Natalie, our best friends, and they were down in Southern Illinois in Peoria, and we got on the phone with them, and we just started praying and saying, all right, we're not going to go through this again. And miraculously, Nettie held on to the baby, and he was born in July of 2009. Yeah. So now we've got this beautiful new son, and 2009, I kept having... that was when I kind of had another back surgery, because what had happened was, the ancillary body parts.
I just mentioned this to you, and I won't tell my story today, but I should someday.
Yeah,
because both of my children ended up being miraculous as well.
Yeah,
and with a lot of thought.
Yeah, and you should tell that. It'd be good for the listeners to kind of hear the story of the founder of the Founders Forum. Hear your story someday. So maybe Sarah and I can come back and interview you someday.
Oh, that'd be great.
There's a thought.
Yeah,
we'll talk about that next year. We'll do that.
So yeah, now we're 2009, and what I was saying is that my back had become the major issue. You're having like wrist surgeries and shoulder surgeries, and it's kind of funny that I look back on it now and I'm thinking, oh, I'm just having another wrist surgery, no big deal. But then the back started to go, because I had 2 or 3 initial back surgeries after the initial fall and had my hips worked on at the same time. But then now when the back and the hips started to go, everything started to get really more aggressive. Like everything's just starting to get really like, now when you're talking about your spine, everything's aggressive. So in 2009, I have another back surgery. I had to have another follow-up to that because it didn't go well. And I kind of came out of that different, like not completely different, but a little different. Then we fast forward to 2013, because after those first
different physically.
Different physically, yes, different physically. And again, I'm talking, I know this is about, Founders Forum. Again, I'm a business owner, so I'm just grinding through. Like, I'm still working every day. I'm still leading construction crews. We're still building shopping centers. We're still doing things. And you're having to do all this while you're talking about the struggle of physical. And it was just a lot. But I know that we got to get to the life-changing moment. And I think that that's the important part, because we've already teased out the fact that I'm in a wheelchair and I golf in a cool golf cart and everything. So I'm going to fast forward to 2013, if that's okay, Mark.
Yeah.
So 2013 comes, and it's crazy how the big life moments for Nettie and I, when it came to the physical for me, God blessed us with miracle, because I talked about 2009 was when the back started to really go, blessed with a son. 2014 comes, and or 2013, excuse me, and we had tried to have another child after JJ because we didn't want JJ because he's 10 years younger than our other two kids who are now married, and we've got 2 grandkids and all that. JJ's 15. We didn't want him to grow up alone, so we tried to have another child. My wife had her 5th miscarriage. So we chose to adopt our youngest boy, Jackson. Yeah, and I can say that openly because he knows that, and he's blessed to have that. And
that's part of my story as well.
Exactly.
So,
yeah, that's the cool parallel that we share and the heart connection there.
Except we did it first. We did it in reverse order.
Exactly. Yeah, we put the caboose, and you had the train car. So we, I get 2013, and it was July that he was born, and we had decided that we were going to adopt him when he was 3 months old, and we don't have time to tell his whole story, which would be another cool opportunity. But he's born in July of 2013, and in August of 2013, I go in for what we call the life-changing experience. I'm going in for, this would be my 9th back surgery at that point in time. And again, I'm thinking back surgery. At this point, I've had so many surgeries. I'm probably in the 30s. I don't remember exactly where it was. But Nettie and I were like, well, it's just, mark it on the calendar. We're going in for a tune-up. That's the way I described it to people, was because at this point, your body's just deteriorating. So I got to go in for another tune-up, like people take their cars in to get their brakes. I'm just going in to fuse another vertebrae in my spine. And I went in August and had that back surgery, and unfortunately acquired MRSA in my spine, which is a flesh-eating bacteria, MRSA, and I acquired that in the hospital. And from that point on, had to have 22 surgeries in my spine to basically save my life. Every time they would take me off IV antibiotics for longer than a week or 10 days, my fever would spike back up to 103. So they'd put me back on IV antibiotics. And we battled this infection from 2013 to 2017, and they couldn't find a doctor who could figure out what was wrong with me. And so I would just keep going in for these clean out surgeries. We had seen multiple doctors at we went to Mayo, at Rush in Chicago, at some of the best hospitals, and nobody could figure out how to eradicate, which is probably the right term, this infection. And I want to get to this part because it's important, and then we can kind of have the conversation of what everything looked like.
But I just want to point out, in case people miss it, that this is now we're talking about saving your life at this point.
Yeah, because I had gone septic, which means a blood infection. I had kidney failure a couple times. In that period, my wife kind of figured out that I had 1,300 doses of IV antibiotics in that 4-year period. And she was hanging IV bags, and I was hanging IV bags every 8 hours to save my life. Yeah, and kind of just keep me functional. But I'm still working because that's what you do as a business owner. You just keep working. And
Well, I think it's a good place to break.
Yeah,
because then something happened, and we'll talk about that.
I think it's important.
So keep listening. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back on Founders Forum.
The Great Lakes Adaptive Sports Association, GLASA, serves athletes of all ages with a primary physical or visual disability through adaptive sports programming. GLASA empowers and supports youth, adults, and injured veterans through 20-plus adaptive sports including tennis, pickleball, track and field, wheelchair basketball, sled hockey, and so much more. Serving over 1,000 athletes throughout the year, GLASA is a national leader in adaptive sports. From June 11th to the 16th, hundreds of athletes with disabilities will compete at the 2025 Great Lake Games in partnership with the Hartford in Illinois, with competitions in archery, boccia, para-powerlifting, para-triathlon, shooting, swim, and track and field. Registration is now open, and volunteer opportunities are available to help make our mission possible. To donate to GLASA or learn more, visit glasa.org.
we are back on Founders Forum with a fascinating story with Jason Sfire. We have Sari Green in the studio with us. And so then.
Yeah, I guess so then is a good way. Yeah, so, and this is a cool moment where another person from our local church, a good friend of my wife, and her family had given a lot of, her dad actually, his life was saved at Northwestern, so the family had blessed the hospital with a nice endowment. And so she had some connections there. And she goes, you know what, there's this doctor I just read about at Northwestern Memorial Hospital downtown, which if anybody's looking for a hospital, go to Northwestern. I mean, not only because they saved my life, but because they're just amazing. Yeah. And her name was Gretchen, and she came to my wife and she said, you know what, I don't know. I just read about this doctor. He just had this write-up in MD World, whatever, and he's supposed to be one of the renowned spinal revisionists, which means he revises people's surgeries that go bad. Well, as I described previously, that's exactly what happened. So we went to see Dr. Tyler Kosky, and it's crazy because we had probably seen 10 to 12 doctors at this point to try and figure out what was going on and how to stop this infection. And I've already had close to 17 or 18 surgeries because I ended up having 4 more with Dr. Kosky. And he walks in and like that screen that's right there, Mark, in front of us, you go to Northwestern and they make you do 50 x-rays, it felt like. They do their own MRI, they do their own CT, they do all their own testing because they're like, no one else is good at this. We're going to get what we want, which I appreciated. Puts all my stuff up on the screen and he points to it. First of all, he says, how are you, by the way? And then he goes, I know what's wrong with you. I can fix you, but you're never going to be the same.
By the way, you did skip a part that I have to tell you about. You got there,
yeah,
and somebody told you you're not seeing the doctor right away.
Yeah, you're right.
Another MRI.
Yeah, you got to go do all this, and I'm like, are you kidding me? I have had so much testing. I'm like, I've got this. Like, my wife was carrying around a suitcase, literally a rolling suitcase full of stuff. But anyways, yeah, and he says that to me. He goes, I know what's wrong with you. I can fix you, but you're never going to be the same. And we're sitting there going like, what does that mean? But it didn't really matter because just the fact that we finally found somebody that, first of all, didn't say, oh, you're a conflict of interest because you're someone else's patient that has gone bad. He's actually willing to help. We were like, we're signed. What do we got to do? Well, he described the process, and it was going to be a series of multiple surgeries. And it would all depend on what he found when he got in there on the first surgery.
I'm going to stop you for one second. There was a point at which I remember you said, I don't want to do this anymore.
I did, yeah.
And that was prior to this, I think. Right?
It was right before that I almost, I was never to the point where, thank God, where I was, suicidal or anything. But I had literally just said, if no one else can fix me, if this is going to take me, then this is going to take me, and I'm done. I was so exhausted.
You told Nettie that.
I told Nettie that, and she said, "There's no way." Right. She said, "We're not even entertaining that."
Hero,
yeah,
one of the heroes of the story.
For sure. She said, "We're not going down that path." She brought a picture of our kids, and she said, "If you won't fight for me," and not that I wouldn't, but she goes, "Look at them." And when you think about that, like, you're just like, okay. Time to put on your big boy, pants, tie your boots a little tighter, and let's go. But it's hard. I mean, you get to a point where you're continuing to just have trauma after trauma after trauma, and I can deal with the pain. I can deal with the trauma. Sometimes it was the letdown of, because, like everybody probably has this, when you go to a doctor, you want a solution. You want a doctor to tell you what's wrong. That's why you go to a doctor. Right. And you're seeing all of these doctors, and they continue to just tell you, I either can't help you, I don't want to help you, or I don't know how to help you, right? And I was ready to just kind of say, you know what, if this is it, like, Right. And I have many of friends now who that I call them friends, but many people that I've spoken to have been in similar situations to this, that have been in the same place, and I get it. So if you're someone out there listening that's in that situation, yeah, I get it, but don't give up.
So I wanted to make sure we covered that.
Yeah.
But now we're back to the doctor's office.
Yeah. So we're in there, and he describes the surgery process. It's going to be multiple surgeries. Know what we're dealing with when we get in there is what he says. Great. Get in there, get in your body, right? I mean,
when he did tell you, like he did say you'd be in a there afterwards.
He did, well, it was after he kind of said you're never going to be the same, and we didn't know what that meant. So we, got inquisitive, and he said, I don't think you'll ever walk normally again. Didn't just say a chair at first. He said it depends what we find, but after surgery, right? So I ended up having 4 more surgeries. I had a posterior approach, which means they opened up my back again. In 2 different places. So there's like 22 inches of scar on my back. They went in through my left side, and then they went in through my right side because they couldn't find, when they got in there, they couldn't find any good bone, because what had happened was the infection had jumped on all the metal that they had put in there from these previous 9 back surgeries that I described up to 2009. And you can dump all these antibiotics into you, but it doesn't kill it on the metal. It kills it in your bone and your soft tissue, but it's not going to kill it on the metal. So basically, he had to take all of those previous 9 surgeries, which, to describe for everybody, I have a spinal fusion basically from my sternum all the way to the end of my spine. So you're talking rods and screws, and he had to take it all out and start over.
You had a lot of metal, and you still have a lot of metal.
Yeah, I have less metal now because thankfully we've had it removed after things fused. But yeah, so he got in there and found that there wasn't, I wasn't fusing. My spine for about 14 levels, 14 vertebrae was pudding. He described it to my wife, is what he described, that it was pudding. And he said, now we're going to have to do all 4 surgeries. And that's kind of when I came out of those 4 surgeries. And then you go to what's called, outpatient rehab. I was inpatient for a while. Then I go to outpatient rehab trying to relearn how to walk, because all the trauma to my back and all the scar tissue and the infection had actually eaten holes in my dura and into my spinal cord. And then when those heal, they cause scarring. So then that scarring, basically now you have scarring on the inside of your spinal cord that it can never be healed and never be changed. And if anybody knows anything about scar tissue, once you have it, it just continues to build and build and build. And if they can't debrief it or get it out, unfortunately, it just continues to make your lower extremities weaker and weaker. So that's why I'm in a wheelchair, everybody.
Right.
Big surprise.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but that hasn't slowed you down either.
No, it's been an incredible opportunity to be honest, for me, having to experience disability. It took me a little while to accept the fact that I was going to be disabled the rest of my life, for my wife, for my kids. But we looked at it as another challenge, and as a business owner and an entrepreneur, as we've been talking about, right? I was just kind of like, what's the next hill to take?
Right.
That's what I'd said to myself. And my wife has been my biggest advocate through all this. And all she ever says is, listen, remember that you have a family first. You've got a business that we need to make a priority, but go fly. And she's been a great support through all that. So, and
she's your biggest cheerleader. For sure.
Yeah, I'm sure she is. Yeah. Sometimes she's a little stern with me, but she's right now. Yeah.
Right. That's why I say I'm sure she is. Right.
Yeah.
I get it.
But no, it just kind of catapulted me into what's next in my life.
You just made a good point, though. If you had not had the challenges of being an entrepreneur and the hills and the valleys and the challenges, maybe you wouldn't have been as well equipped to handle this.
I totally agree, because I think it takes leadership to lead in these hard times. Right. And if I didn't have that prior leadership experience of creating and building businesses and things, I don't know that I'd be equipped to deal with all this.
I'd imagine the role model that your father played was big.
Yeah, it was. He lost his dad when he was 18 years old, and he really, kind of created something out of nothing. So through that whole time, being able to see, for me, that like, okay, I just got to keep one brick on top of another, one brick on top of another.
Well, another important thing that's a really good point. I want to also point out that when you say leadership, because what I've learned recently, I used to have a vision of leadership as leading other people.
Yeah.
But leadership really starts with leading yourself.
Yeah,
and being an example.
If you can't get out of your own way, right? How can you? And I always describe it as you can't take someone how do I always say it? Interesting. You can't take somewhere. Never mind. I can't remember. We've been talking about a lot of stuff.
Either way, we're getting a lot of lessons from speaking to you.
Yeah.
We don't have a whole lot of time left. I want to ask you real quick about your future vision.
Yeah.
For the next 3 years, because I know you have a lot on your plate and a lot of things you're doing.
It's good. It's exciting. To be honest, I haven't been this excited in a while. After becoming disabled, it was time to learn how to, find my wheels instead of find my legs. Yeah. Figure out who I was, what was in store. Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's my nickname somebody gave me on the golf course at Babcock Ranch. But I'm excited about the next phase because it's actually kind of solidifying the dream that my dad and I've had together. Dad 35 years ago when he started the company, me 33 years alongside him and leading the companies for the last almost 10 years. We're actually going to sell the portfolio of properties. We're going to finally monetize it and see the fruits of both of our labors. But we're not done. You know what I mean? That doesn't mean you're done. We're going to do some exchange stuff, and we'll still have a nice portfolio of properties. I just want to get to a point at some point where things can be a little less for me, and then I can.
Well, you're about living life at this point.
Yeah, and focus a little more on some of the missional aspects of I think what God has for me, which I've been leaning into, but it's really hard to do both and balance both. So I have a lot of opportunities to advocate for adaptive athletes and people with disability, to speak at conferences and do things like that, and then coach, because I coach right now, wheelchair football, wheelchair pickleball, and instruct for golf a little bit. So really want to lean into that, and then just maybe lean into being a grandpa a little bit and spending time with my boys that are still at home, my adult children, and my grandkids.
And you're an athlete advocate, so now we know what that means.
Yeah. And
you're serving on several nonprofit boards that we talked about. And we're almost out of time, so I do want to ask you, because you've said a lot over you've said a lot over the last couple shows. And, and it's a question that people often choose to be asked on the show, which is if you could speak to your younger self, what advice would you give you? I'm sure you have some thoughts about that.
Yeah, and we I think that'd be easy for all the listeners to understand what that would be because we talked about it. My younger self could be an arrogant knucklehead at times, and didn't.
Who among us wouldn't say that?
Right. So I would just say to myself, hey, maybe let's think a little bit more before we react, right? Let's take a little bit more of a discerning look at some of our decisions. But I also am proud of the younger myself because, as I described, there was a lot of perseverance and a lot of determination to kind of live through everything I'd been through.
Well, I just want to tell you, and this goes to Sari as well, but especially to you as my next door neighbor. Yeah, I just feel so fortunate that you are, and that since we've engaged and we've been talking the last few weeks, it's really been powerful thing in my life, and I'm proud to know you.
I know. I can't wait to get to know you better, and I'm really looking forward to meeting your wife.
Yeah. She's a rock star.
She's something. She's great. It's hard not to meet her because she's everywhere I go. She's there.
Yeah. She's a little. So but it's a pleasure too, and I really appreciate you asking me to be a part of this, and I'm excited for all your listeners, right, to continue to listen to your shows and hear from many entrepreneurs and founders of businesses that got great stories.
Well, thanks so much, and thank you all for being here and going on this journey with us. And I look forward to speaking with you again next week on Founders Forum.
We hope you enjoyed your time with Founders Forum and that you found value to take with you throughout your day. Join us again next week for another episode of Founders Forum on WXKB 1039 HD2. Sponsored by Mark J. Bernstein. The views expressed do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, its management, or Beasley Media Group.